podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. I'm Tom. So, following on from last week's look at those premium chunks, the prime cuts that take up the heftiest bit of our budget, I'm hungry. And this week, we're completing our look at pricing by spending time on the Tiddlers, those edge pieces that may look like small fry, that's intended, but pack a mighty punch in terms of value. I'm joined as always by Sam. All good, mate? Still tinkering away?
Yeah, it's that time of year, isn't it? I think the drafts and the strategies start to really take form now, and you get a little bit of confirmation bias. You can see a bit of a stat that you like the look of, and you just hold on to it for the rest of preseason now. So I'm really trying to not get too attached to any one specific draft, but obviously we're 2 weeks in, so I'm starting to form biases and trying to narrow in on a few different particular strategies I like the look of. It's definitely the most enjoyable part of the season before my rank takes a tumble, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that as well. So long may that continue. Anyway, as always, we are Who Got the Assist, and a special welcome to anyone who's listening for the first time or for the first few times, and to anyone watching along for the first time as well. We really appreciate that you would give us a go at the start of a new season. So thank you very much for joining us. On today's agenda, we're going to be taking a look at those edge pieces and their importance to our sides and why they are so important to our side. Starting off with goalkeepers, I think we're going to do all of the goalkeepers. Even though there are premium keepers, they're still cheaper by comparison. Didn't have time from last week. We're going to chuck them in this week anyway. Defenders up to 5 million, midfielders up to 7 million, and strikers up to 6.5 million. So we almost definitely won't have the time to discuss every single one of those players. We'll miss out some, I'm sure. If we do, leave a comment, let us know who we've missed and why it's so important that we talk about them. And also, we won't be talking about our drafts today either, because we've got so much to cover. But don't worry, we'll be back on Thursday recording. I think we're going to stream it as well, and then we'll probably push it out on audio the following Tuesday to chat through where we're at in terms of our drafts, our chip strategies, and of course, our simple rules to doing okay in FPL, or not royally screwing up in FPL. Next week's one, is basically coming early because Tom's on holiday. I didn't sign that off. I don't know who HR is at this thing, but absolutely ludicrous to go on a holiday at this point, Tom. It is Tuesday, the 4th of August. Lots of preseason action, transfer market in full swing, and just over 2 weeks to go before the start of the season. We've got a lot to get through today, Tom. Shall we get cracking?
Yeah, let's do it. So to foreground this, one of Sam's favourite words in the terms in the FPL vernacular. I don't know if you can lay claim. I don't know if any other pods have picked this up, but if you ever see it out there in the ether, Sam, just don't be afraid to be like, "That's my word. That's my word." Damn it. These edge pieces. So I suppose before you can get stuck in, the best way to foreground this really is that you've got 64 million to you've got to spend 64 million, as I said a couple of weeks ago, to populate your squad. Like you've got to. So your goalkeepers and your defenders you've got to pay for, and your midfielders and your forwards you've got to pay 4.5, which leaves you actually only with 36 million of elective money to play with. And if you spend a lot on the big guns, the guys we spoke about last week in terms of the chunks, you've really got to search for that value in the cheap seats. And the whole term, the edge pieces on screen, you'll see a bit like the side of a jigsaw. Like it's kind of the bits that make it all fit together, right? And the premium and the pricier assets, they traditionally seem to be a bit more fixed, and those edge pieces are the more sort of situational ones that could be sensational, but they also see a lot more sort of transfer traffic, don't they? But there's lots of gems in there, we see every season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the edge pieces, particularly at the start of the season, are very important to get right. And they're also harder to predict as well. There's by no means obvious edge pieces. That's why they're edge pieces. If they were if they were so essential and they were so blindingly obvious that they're really great picks, they would probably be more expensive, because if you're looking for consistency, you pay for consistency. That's why Haaland, why Bruno costs as much as they do, because they are inherently fairly consistent. Edge pieces are cheaper because they do tend to be a little bit less consistent or haven't proven it in seasons gone past. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to try and pick out those slightly cheaper picks that will help to pad out your squad, help you to balance everything, and help you to afford having some premiums in there and some more expensive players, which we talked about last week. But although not all of them end up being consistent, there's always some breakout stars. There's always a 4.5 million defender that ends up being the one. There's always a cheaper midfielder. There's always a cheaper forward that ends up being the one that you can kind of build your squad around. We're here to try and figure out who that might be. And there will undoubtedly be some mysterious edge piece that we don't clock onto in time, but we're going to try our very best to highlight as many as we can today. And hopefully it puts us all in a good position to pick the right ones for once. Sometimes they're more obvious than not, though. Right, Tom?
Yeah.
We've had previous seasons where there's just obvious mispricing. Have you felt that way this year with the edge pieces, or has it been a little bit more mysterious and a bit more balanced?
I think maybe there's one or two, which we'll definitely come back to, that certainly look like standouts straight away. So, for example, Slide being 7 million, we'll definitely come on to him and talk about him. I think that's reflected in the fact that he's in most teams. But you are right that there are always going to be a pet project player or hobby player that we just simply can't get to today. So, as you mentioned kind of right at the start, in this, I've kind of already done a bit of pre-editing, as it were, and removed some perhaps less interesting players for us at the start of the year. And you may absolutely love them. So, for example, we know friend of the pod, Dylan's a massive Ndoye stan. But we simply can't cover and name everyone here, even the ones we keep in the index that you'll see or I'll post online. We may not give voice to them, and that's not us saying they're a bad pick. It's just us saying that, you know, there's probably other things to talk about. It's a difficult balance, isn't it? But hopefully we'll give you a starting point to go off and do your own research from this. But do let us know if there's anything kind of that you think we've missed, and apologies in advance if there's any sort of big hobby horse player that you really love that we simply don't get around to. The opportunity cost, of course, of going through every single name exhaustively is a 3-hour-long pod, and I'm not sure anyone wants that. I suppose, you know, you're a badge carrying nerd when you've got to give this sort of caveat at the start. And a further note as well, that during this, you'll see some indices on YouTube, and I'll post them on social media. And they're done basically by summing points per start, key factors such as per 90, key factors per 90, such as saves for goalkeepers, XGI per 90 for out-of-forward players, def con, and then multiplied by goals or clean sheet odds and the start percentage. Clearly, you know, we're not saying that this is what will happen next year. For example, Richarlison comes out as the top 6 million forward based on the calculations, but we're not saying that's the one to go for. A bit of a springboard into discussion more than something that we're sticking to rigidly. Do apply brain when reading it, and kind of what we say. We're not going to go through it kind of academically line by line. We're just going to use it as kind of a reference point. There are a few things. There's lots to get through. So let's start off maybe with the mid to cheap forwards, Sam. So this is 7 million forwards up to 7 million, isn't it?
Yes, so. I did say 6.5, I think, but yeah, we're including Sesko in this and Marmoush as well, who might one day be FPL relevant, but isn't today, I don't think. But yeah, we've got a fairly good range of forwards here. Lots of 6 million options that are quite interesting. A lot of debate going on about who the standout 6 million is. Any standouts here you want to kick us off with, Tom?
I think it's the battle of the 6.0s, isn't it? More than anything.
It has to be. Yeah.
Calvert-Lewin, the top scorer last year amongst this price band, 142 points, 0.55 XGI per 90. I think that puts him joint second amongst this group. He does fairly well in this particular index. On penalties, of course, a couple of goals in pre-season as well, quite notably. And I think that him, probably Brobby, who I've seen in quite a few teams. I know there's an analytics sort of bent perhaps towards Solanke, and also Igor Jesus are all players who are kind of 6 and kind of the player who in the past have been the sort of person that excels in talisman theory. So the player who a mid-level team looks to score points. And, in the case of Calvert-Lewin, a player like that who's got decent data, yes, admittedly, over the past few years, he has been running cold, shall we say, but last year at least seems to have found his niche. With penalties, I think that at the start does look pretty good, doesn't it? But I think it is kind of around those 6 million, that those 6 million players are really kind of catching the eye. And in terms of, last week we were saying Haaland, João Pedro, those are probably the two. If you can go free up front, it's probably going to be one of those.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've kind of overlooked the 7 millions to begin with. So Sesko, I just don't know if he's going to get the minutes to begin with. Could be interesting one day, but I think we'll probably overlook him and Marmoush for now. Again, Marmoush, if Haaland's down, becomes almost essential, you would imagine. But again, right now, not relevant. 6 millions is probably where it does get interesting for me. And right now, if you're looking at a 3-4-3 or a bench boost draft, I think most of those drafts would have a 6 million forward in it. I think the one that is kind of putting his hand up as like the most popular right now, or the one who's got the least buts about him for me, is Calvert-Lewin. I know he is inherently very shaky as an FPL pick. He's always been one that's divided opinion, but he does get 90 minutes. He does have penalties, and he is fairly talismanic for Leeds. I think the most about him versus the other 6 millions. A lot of them very exciting, but don't quite tick off as many boxes for me. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think penalties is probably the big one. I know it sounds really kind of quite a dull point, but I think it's a good one. If Welbeck hadn't gone to Chelsea, you may be kind of casting covetous glances at him. The top three in the index, for what it's worth, are Richarlison, Evan Nilsson and Walter Marde, each have a but about them, even with Krupi Jr. missing for 2 or 3 months, I think it is. I would never ever go Evan Nilsson deep. Just do not ever buy that guy. he may surprise me. He may turn out kind of to be the Calvert-Lewin of this year, but I never do that. I do think it's them. I think that really the default here is to Calvert-Lewin. I'm kind of making it quite short because we've got a lot to get through. I do have a little hunch on Igor Jesus, though, who's been doing very well in pre-season. Since I saw the price, I've really liked it. Just because, Sam, it reminds me a little bit of the player who's got the highest XGI per 90 in this group, which is JP Mateta. So I wrote about it in Talisman Fear in 2024, actually, that when Glasner came in, he absolutely transformed Mateta, like more than tripled his XG per 90, more than tripled the points that he scored from half 1 to half 2 of the year. And I don't know, it could happen for Igor Jesus, but at that price and at the low ownership, I think there's one that you can afford to wait and see on.
Yeah, I quite like Nottingham Forest's opening few fixtures. I think they've got some nice home ones, but I don't know if I like him enough to have him ahead of Calvert-Lewin just yet, because I think Leeds fixtures are just as good. Igor Jesus is a player I'm really interested in. At 6 million, I think that's a very fair price. And I think if I see him performing to level he has done in pre-season in the Premier League, I'll quite quickly add him to my watch list. But for now, I don't know he's on penalties. There are some rumours that he might have a bit of that share ahead of Gibbs White, but I think it's fairly safe to assume Gibbs White's still going to have something to say about that. I don't know. For me, he's probably in this list my second favourite right now, directly behind Calvert-Lewin. And if I was just going on vibes, I might even pick him ahead of Calvert-Lewin, but it's more of a head versus heart thing. And I think my head is saying, go with the player you know most about, you've got most certainty on, and that is Calvert-Lewin right now. But Igor Jesus is not far behind. And if you've got like a strong gut feeling about Nottingham Forest being a much better side this year, then Jesus could easily be the guy at 6 million. He could massively take a step up under Glasner. He's got the quality. Glasner's a great coach. Yeah, no worries whatsoever about that if you're feeling one way over the other.
For sure. 5.5s, all 3 Brighton forwards the two Greek lads and Jorginho Rutter are all 5.5 now. I probably, because of the existence of Pascal Gross and also Diego Gomez, who's worth mention, wouldn't be as interested in them, but could do something for you, I guess, at some point. And also Munoz over at Fulham on penalties, but they've just signed Gonzalo Garcia from Real Madrid. So I think that may probably put pay to looking at that guy. Of the newly promoted, Haji Wright, 28-year-old American, 17 goals last year, 0.64 XG per 90 in the championship on penalties. It's in the championship, we don't know. McBurney, however, we do know from Sheffield United. He didn't go to the World Cup, scored the winner for Hull in the playoff, of course, and 17 goals and 17 assists in the championship. They were second bottom last year for XG in the entire championship, is something that you'll no doubt remind me of, Sam, throughout the season. And Emerson, who's the new Ipswich guy, 5.5, was signed from Toulouse, by Ipswich. 20 years old, respectable, 0.43 per 90 in League 1 last year. All an option. We're not the sort of pod who does that, really, apart from at this very moment. I suppose, had you right, Sam, if you're looking to bench boost in 2, perhaps is one that you'd be looking at. But for me, I think as I'm kind of, we'll talk about next week, on Thursday, more interested in bench boost in 1, I think, and I think I just go with it with Calvert-Lewin, really.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right at 5.5, if you're bench boosting 2, I really like the look of. But if I've got the 0.5, I'll probably still go with the guy that I know more about at this point. One other very quick mention, I would just bring up Asula at Newcastle. Really good points per start last season when he got into the team. Obviously, that was a hot streak. We don't expect it to continue to that level, but still a player that I have got an eye on. I know Newcastle are all at sea at the moment in the transfer market, but if he starts, I think it's still relatively promising longer term. And the fixtures do progressively get better and better over the first few game weeks. So one that I'm keeping an eye on, but probably not ahead of the likes of Jesus or Calvert-Lewin for me. It's a shame about Welbeck. If Richarlison goes to Everton, that might be interesting. I think there was a little rumor about that you mentioned to me earlier today, Tom. But of the promoted guys, Wright is the one that I would look at 5.5. In fact, he's probably the only 5.5 I would really look at right now. Even Jorginho Rutter, I'd be a little bit worried about. So, yeah, anything under 6 million, and I'd be tempted to not bench boost and just burn the spot altogether down to a 4.5.
Totally. All right, on to goalkeepers. Yes, very, very exciting. We'll do this fairly quickly. Raya hit 6, probably a good pickup, but I suppose if we see Mascara or Calafiori, as discussed last week, play the Community Shield, there's going to be an interest in them. I think a lot of this is quite situational, really. I think I'm looking at 2 4.5s on bench boost. I'm likely to default to the top of the pile, which is Verbruggen and a Spurs goalkeeper. So what I sort of did was made an average of. It's a bit of chicanery, but I made an average of Leeds Spurs basically by using the two keepers that appear for them, combine them as if they were the one player who played the entire season. And if you shove the Spurs one in, it actually comes in as the top 4.5 goalkeeper, and that's based on points per start, saves per 90, XGC per 90, and also the clean sheet odds for the first 5 games. I don't know. I just think if you're going to bench boost in 1, just default to those 2, because there's no sort of Hail Mary obvious sort of double up for the goalkeepers. I don't think at 4.5 for the first sort of 4 or 5. I did think about like having Rushworth, who's joined Coventry, and Verbruggen, because that gives you the bench boost in 1. Yeah, that does include Arsenal. You'd be hoping for 3 or 4 points, and then game week 2 you can have that whole game for Rushworth. 3 and 4 you have Verbruggen versus Leeds in Coventry, and then Rushworth's got Forest away in 5. But I think Kinski's probably just got a better defense behind him, as Olmo points out to me on Blue Sky. And I mean, I think that's probably the best way to go. Ipswich actually had a better XGC than Coventry in the Championship as well. But it's not like a Burnley and Trafford situation with either them or Rushworth. Like there was no standout defense in the Championship as such last year in terms of the underlying data. So, yeah, I mean, starting with the 4.5, Sam, I think that those two are the ones that I'd be saying, yeah, just go with them, is in Kinski and probably Verbruggen.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially if you're bench boosting in game week 1, which seems to be picking up legs. Verbruggen is probably the standout 4.5 on a bench boost, but if you want a combination of two, unfortunately, the clean sheet odds for any of the teams with a 4.5 million keeper in game week 1 are really quite poor. Game week 2 is not a lot better, but obviously you've got Rushworth. If you were looking at maybe having maybe even Verbruggen in game week 1 and then doing the double keepers for the bench boost in game week 2, Rushworth might come into it a bit more. But I suppose the question that I'm toying up with is, if I am bench boosting early, am I comfortable just with the two 4.5? So Kinski and Verbruggen would be my two as well, or would I perhaps upgrade one of them to 0.5 to Lamens, for instance, and cash in on two really good opening fixtures, Hull and Ipswich? I think Man United are second for clean sheet odds in the first game week. They're top of the clean sheet odds for the second game week at home to Ipswich. So for 0.5 extra, I think if you've got that spare, I wouldn't mind upgrading one of the two and then doing that to optimize for the bench boost. But yeah, if you're just going with 9 million spent in the keeper range, or 1 million over the minimum, then yeah, it's probably Verbruggen and Kinski for me at the moment, unless you're bench boosting in two when Rushworth comes into it as well.
Yeah, probably about right. I've long for the days when you had like Nick Pope or Tom Heaton chuck him in for Burnley, and you knew that you had a decent run there of Foster and Boaz Myhill as well at West Brom. I just don't know. I think it's because I'm so narrowly focused on getting the most from an early bench boost that I haven't really looked too far at the more expensive players. Come on to him in a minute, but Luke Shaw perhaps is a reason why you may not go for Lamens, but there is longevity issue with Shaw because they have to sign a left back. I mean, they simply have to, United. Whereas with Lamens, you'd at least get kind of the first 5, you'd think. You'd be hoping that Shaw would be okay for those sort of plum opening couple of fixtures, though. And after that, it does get a bit dicier. I think with keepers, sometimes it can play a really helpful role. And what they've done with the Raya price, particularly, is they've removed that ability to basically cover the Arsenal defence with Raya, which is what we all probably would have done if it was 5.5. So I think that's an example of them being quite savvy with it. Could you say the same for Donnarumma? Perhaps, but Gvardiol's existence at the moment, as we sort of discussed last week, for me, makes me think I'd rather spend the money on him than on the big Italian in goal. Beyond that, you start to get into, the likes of Alisson Becker at 5, Henderson, Martinez, Kelleher. I mean, you might as well. It's kind of like, well, unless I'm playing 5.5 for Donnarumma, Raya, I'm not going to pay for Pickford because of the DEFCON ability of Tarko and also Braithwaite. If I'm looking at the 5s, I might as well go down to 4.5 and have 0.5 to spend elsewhere, because every draft that I've looked at so far, it could always do with 0.5 somewhere to upgrade something, and downgrading the keeper for me is always something that I'm very willing to do. Just because I'm bench boosting early, that's the reason I'm spending an extra 0.5 to have another goalkeeper on the bench who's likely to start game week 1. Yeah,
I agree with everything you just said there. I think when you look at the price points of the upper keepers, so Raya, Pickford, Donnarumma, in isolation, I think they all make sense. But then how pickable are they? Yeah, you've got a decision to make with someone like Raya. Do you want that extra 0.5 spent in your keeper area just to know for sure that you've got the starter at Arsenal? Or do you shave off 0.5? And if you pick someone like Calafiori, for instance, yeah, the risk is higher that he might not get 90 or he might not even start every single week. But he has so much attacking upside that it feels like you might end up missing quite a lot of big scoring weeks, whereas Raya is just going to tick along. But you can get a keeper that I think will tick along decently enough until you want a wild card anyway this season for at least $1 million cheaper, if not $1.5 million cheaper. So Raya, if I had the money, would be in, but I don't, and I don't think many of us do. So I think that's why he's being overlooked by a few. Donnarumma is one I hadn't actually really considered, because maybe it's the Edison historic ownership that's putting me off altogether, but I just can't get on board with it, especially when Gvardiol's 5.5 and a couple of the Man City defenders do have really good attacking upside, Gvardiol being one of them. So do I really want to cover the Man City defense without any of the potential for attacking upside? I'm not sure I do. I quite like a few of the keepers at 5 million as well this season. I like Lamens. I like Kelleher. I quite like Roofs as well. Roofs. And it sounds like Chelsea might be in for Costa as well. So if that happens, interesting to see what price he comes in at. But yeah, I'm relatively keen on the 5 million category, less so on the 5.5. I'd probably at that point just go straight up to 6 for Raya and find the extra 0.5 over any of the 5.5s. But at the moment, I'm looking at 4.5s and 5s only, really.
Yeah, goalkeeper is probably the last thing you should think about, really, because the points are so random, honestly. And I regretted not having highlighted this on screen, but actually it doesn't matter that much, because at the end of the day, you can't really tell, can you? Let's move on. So from this point, DEFCON hit rate is also included. This is courtesy of Nick WGTA, who's created a lovely little tool which they inform this. I'll note it below when I've posted this. FPL-history.vercel, VERCL.app. Do check that out. It's a really good sort of free source which uses the FPL API. Starting with 5.0 defenders. Interesting bunch. So the 5.5 said last week, maybe not. Maybe a bit weird, like, Gvardiol, Mosquera, those sorts of guys. But there's quite a lot of sort of mileage in the 5.0s. And for me at the moment, I'm actually really interested in Ballard at 5. He's been in basically every draft. And 2 good fixtures to start with. It's such a way in Fulham at home. I do really worry for Fulham. And a really good hit rate with DEFCON 63%. And he's got that goal threat too, which I quite like about him. I would have to hide him for 4 and 5. I think it's Arsenal, Man City, but that's future Tom's problem. And for now, to start with, I quite like that. I suppose Zero, really thinking about it. I know you really likes Canvo, who we'll speak about later on, kind of early doors. But I think the 2 which are really kind of in mind for me are Neco Williams and Ballard. Those are the 2 that I think are probably the ones that are garnering the most discussion of the players who were in FPL last year. But our cover boy is Vuskovic, who has recently joined Brighton from Spurs. Excellent in the Bundesliga, a real hero for fancy Bundesliga managers, and basically a 3 points machine, as in FREE, not 3. He'd often hit the magic 200 mark, which was a good return for a player each week in Bundesliga fantasy. 12.5 DEFCON for 90, and really good in the air. He won 3 out of 4 aerial duels last year. Huge for in the Bundesliga, which also meant he's very good at kind of goal threat from set pieces. So I think probably Sam, Ballard, Neco Williams and Vuskovic, those are the 3. We'll talk about some others in a minute, but those are the 3 which are garnering perhaps the most interest from FPL managers at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say generally that's probably about right. Vuskovic, we're all excited to see whether he ends up being the DEFCON beast of this year. I think if he starts immediately, he probably will be. Just ever such slight doubts over what Brighton are going to begin the season with. It might just be safe and he immediately starts, or there's a universe where they integrate him a little bit more slowly, because they've got Struijk there, who's got Premier League experience. They've got Dunk, they've got Kadioglu. They've got a few options that might not mean that he necessarily starts the season, but yeah, I think the chances are pretty high. He's a very, very good centre-back. Williams is one I'm really excited about. I think that attacking upside under Glasner is going to be really interesting this season. He's not bad on DEFCON for a fullback, wing-back anyway. And you also mentioned Cambo as well. And his DEFCON per start was really, really high, highest of all of them that are on this sheet at 12 at 5 million, at over 12 per start. Very, very good. Also don't mind, and I'm going to butcher this, but Muharemovic at Leeds, decent DEFCON. Leeds are a pretty solid defense, looks very self-assured. He could be interesting as well, and he might oust Rodon and be alongside Bijol this year as centre-backs, if rumours are to be believed. So we'll see what happens there. Basically, all of that to say, I think there are actually a lot of 5 million defenders that I really quite like, but they're all quite situational, and it depends what rotations you've got working for you. So you mentioned Ballard. If you need a starter in game weeks 4 and 5, then he's not your guy. If you are bench boosting in game week 2, you might not want Williams because they've got Liverpool that week. Whereas if you're not bench boosting game week 2, Williams, you can maybe find a rotation that hides him on your bench for that week. And then he's got 2 home fixtures either side of that. So it's not so bad. So I'd be almost the way I'm probably going to play the 5 millions, I'm almost certainly going to have 1, if not 2 in my team. And I'm going to try and find a way that they can balance nicely against a 4.5 million defender, or maybe a 4 million defender, for example, where the weeks that maybe it doesn't suit them to start, at least I'm getting something off the bench that I'm pretty happy with. So yeah, it's very situation dependent, but I think there are 5 or 6 here on this sheet that I like the look of enough. And at times this season, I'll probably own most, if not all of those. Even someone like Malik Chow, I can see a world where he ends up being really interesting at 5 million at some point this season. Anderson as well, we've all kind of forgotten about, but he was very good on DEFCON last year. Actually, one honorary mention, sorry, Harry Maguire as well is going to become more and more popular if there are intensifying rumours about Luke Shaw, about Lewis Hall potentially going to Man United and therefore ousting Luke Shaw. Harry Maguire might become quite popular quite quickly. Not the world's worst DEFCON, a bit of goal threat. Now Casemiro's gone, he's probably going to be the aerial threat from corners, and good opening fixtures as well. So yeah, it all depends what system you're playing and what rotations you're looking at, but there's a number of really interesting ones here.
Definitely. I think kind of in terms of the biggest DEFCONers, Camvo at Palace at 12 DEFCON per start. That was the highest sort of joint highest hit rate with Danso, actually, who didn't start that many games. Neither of them did, but both got 7 in 10 basically in terms of hitting the DEFCON, which is obviously very, very encouraging. Anderson, as you mentioned, 61%. Ballard with the 63, who's in kind of third. The ones, I guess, that have got the obviously for centre, what most of these are centre backs, but mostly also players who don't have the high SGI per 90. It's Chow and Vifa, who's the right back at Brighton, obviously. Now, Vifa is actually fairly interesting. 0.18 XGI per 90, which is the joint top with Chow. And his DEFCON for the start was 11.7. He had a low hit rate last year of 48%. That's because you had to hit 12 because he was midfielder last year. Losing the recoveries, he loses about a third of his DEFCON that he would have got last year as a midfielder. So that per start wouldn't be as high as it otherwise looks, just because that's the midfielder numbers. I didn't have time to go through and do them all individually. But just something to bear in mind in case someone looks at this and think, oh, Vifa's got great SGI per 90, a great DEFCON per start. He must be brilliant. Not quite so. I do really like. I think Chow is one of those players I'll be keeping an eye on. It was really good for me last year. Recorded my sole 17 pointer of the season. I think it's from game week 5 onwards at Newcastle. They play Hull that week, and then I think they embark on an okay run. Coventry, I think, actually is the next game after that. So I think he's going to be really, really popular on that early wild card.
Yeah.
Or at least going into that early. Maybe that's kind of the last transfer people make. So keep an eye on him. But for now, I think it's those. I do really Van Hecker has come in and out of quite a lot of my drafts, Sam, actually at Spurs too. I think purely because Kinski exists and I can cover his DEFCON wasn't that brilliant last year. I know that towards the end of the year, we both had him in our teams, and he did DEFCON it for us a few times. His DEFCON per start was 8.8. His extra penalty was all right. I remember we got a random assist at one point, didn't we, as well, towards the end of last year. I think it's purely because you think that Kinski's going to be playing for 0.5 cheaper and will cover the clean sheets should Spurs get them. And maybe Spurs may not be as they were last year, so maybe those DEFCON potential may go down. That maybe Kinski's a tiny bit better than Van Heck, but he has been in a few of my drafts. But yeah, I do think for me, I would like Ballard, but I know that those people like Williams. But as you say, it's situational, and I think something we'll delve into more on Thursday. But a lot of the picks do get put in scope or put out of scope by what you're doing in terms of the early bench boost, if you are indeed bench boosting at all. And I think that there's definitely something to be said as well, which again we'll build on Thursday, I think, because that's too big of a discussion here, that some of these picks actually are more about attacking a very short-term block and assuming that there will be an early wildcard played. So something to bear in mind when you're looking at the 5.0s and indeed at all of these picks. That's for sure. I saw someone say Jacquet as well at Liverpool. I'm not sure about that. And Colwill was in missed training today for Chelsea at 5. So maybe one again to bear in mind.
Yeah, I mean, Jacquet should at the moment be Liverpool's only other starting centre-back alongside Van Dijk. So if he's fit, then fantastic. But just because he needs to be their only other starting centre-back doesn't mean he himself is fit to start. So monitor that one. But yeah, if he maintains fitness, he has been out for a little while, but if he does get back to full fitness at 5 million, that's a really nice, cheap way into the Liverpool defence. I don't think I'm going to see enough of him in pre-season to be confident that he will be fit enough to just regularly run out and start week on week on week. So I'm going to leave it for now, I think. But yeah, at some point this season, he could be really interesting. Maybe not from day one for me. Same goes for Colwill as well, by the way. Very similar story there. I think he could be interesting, but I'm going to need to see a bit more from him first before diving on someone like that. When at the same price, you can have players that you do have a lot more historic confidence on, not just fitness, but also DEFCON hit rates, attacking upside. We've got data on quite a few of these players and quite recent data as well that suggests that they're going to be solid enough that you don't need to take a risk on someone who's coming back from a long-term injury like Jacquet, for instance. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, he's cheap. These players are all cheap enough, going back to the edge pieces point, that they're not going to break the bank too much if you want to get to them eventually. And they're probably not going to be high owned enough for you to be thinking, oh, I need to have this player immediately, or they're going to be a massive threat to my rank. I don't know what the kind of the ownership distribution is like at 5.0. I might have a quick look, because I can't imagine it's that. I don't know. Who's the highest owned? Neco William at 13%. I mean, none of these players are particularly must have purely due to the ownership. Something that we'll probably debate when it comes to Spotsly.
Yeah, I mean, across the board with defenders, I was looking the other day, it might have updated slightly, but I don't think there are any north of like 30%. So there's not really a strong template in defense. And I think people are finding combinations that work, but there are quite unique combinations within that. So yeah, we're not going to be the podcast that sits down and tell you this is the 5 million defender you must have, because it does depend what chip strategy you're playing, what rotations you've got with that 5 million defender. Because there's a lot in this bucket that actually are really quite decent, and any one of them could end up being the best of the bunch. But I think the way I'm seeing it right now is I'm going to look for people that I trust a bit more. So good DEFCON hit rates, data that I can back over quite a while, and good fitness history as well where possible. But yeah, we've mentioned 7 or 8 that we really like the look of in here. So pick your favorite and run with it, I think.
Nice. There'll be more information, of course. On to the 4.5. So anything DEFCONable, pretty much, as you'll see from the highlights, has been raised to 5.0. Bar, I think, 2. Rodon, who got DEFCON 30% of the time last year, as Sam said, there's a big watch out in terms of what happens with the Bosnian bloke alongside Biol. And then, due to Van den Berg's injury, reports say 2 to 3 months. Source Trust Me Bro Brentford on Twitter. Christopher Ayer at Brentford, who hit DEFCON 45% of the time, average of 9.6 per game. But some wrinkles in there, Sam, about where he played, right?
Yeah, exactly. So his DEFCON hit ratio was a bit lower because he also at times played not as a centre back, also as a left back, and I think as a left centre back once or twice as well. In the games where he actually did play as a centre back and when he was fully fit towards the end of the season, his DEFCON per start was a bit higher than this. I think I don't know the exact number. I think it rose to about 10.8, something like that per start, or at least per 90 maybe. So what I'm very interested in, if indeed Van den Berg is out for 2 to 3 months, because that's going to be my wildcard window probably sorted. And if Ayer looks like the nailed starting centre back alongside Collins at 4.5, if I can get DEFCON and some decent fixtures in there as well, I'm absolutely interested. So I'm just keeping my eye on any Brentford news that I can find that is a bit more solid than the Trust Me Bro that I've seen so far, that you have too. Because if it is the case that he's a starter, I'm really, really interested in him. But Rodon as well, potentially. But I am worried, as I mentioned earlier, about who longer term they're going to have as their starting centre backs, because they don't always play a back five. They also play a back four quite regularly. So there's not necessarily room at the end for all three of them.
No, it's probably one that historically I'd have really liked to just shove in and forget about, but there's too much of an asterisk over him at the moment for me. I think for 4.5s, because I'm going with a 4 as well, which we'll talk about in just a second, I think the standout is probably still Shaw. Not because of the data, more because of the fixtures, and also the ownership's fairly high. I think he's got a 25% own, something like that. If he's due to start the season, then I think I'm happy with him. As I said earlier, they have to sign a left back. I can't see him playing every game like he did last year, one of the few to do the 38 over 38. Reports today suggest they're pivoting already from the centre midfield berth. I would think that he starts whole, and if they sign somebody else, hopefully he gets Ipswich too. But after that, it'll be anyone's guess what happens. But hopefully for the very, very short term, thinking back to what I said a minute ago about having those players just for with an early wild card in mind, I think he probably could be the one just to go with. Him and Ayer, if I was going for 2 4.5s, probably get the nod. Mitchell at Crystal Palace might, if you do have some funky rotation thing going on with someone like Ballard, could also be worth looking at, because he can play a role in game week 4 at least. I think they got Ipswich that week when Ballard's got a tougher game. They are a piece of the puzzle for you more than anything, these players. I know there's some people who are looking at like Ola Aina, for example, who was very good a couple of years ago, like on the sneak. He I think he was kind of 4.5 start the season, then climbed all the way to like 5.5, because that was the year that Forrest and Nuno did really, really well, and he got a couple of attacking returns in there. Yeah. Again, I think they've done this pretty well. I think that all of these players have a yeah but against them, and they are all the fullbacks, like all the players who in the past we'd have been thinking, oh yeah, this is the player I want. Screw the centre backs. The fullbacks at least have got some assist potential. Coyote, give me those long throws. Thank you very much. But now I think you look at it and think, oh, where's the DEFCON? Well, DEFCON's probably with Ayer. If you're looking for attacking returns, probably De Cooper if he is back and fit. Let's try for 90 last year, 0.37. That's no joke. That's very, very good. Very good indeed. But do we know? We don't. Sessegnon last year got 10.9 DEFCON per start, by the way, but that also does include recoveries because he was reclassified.
Yeah, and I think it drops quite a lot from the recoveries, right? I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think that does take him quite a lot below, and we just don't know he's going to start. De Cowper's one that, if he does get minutes, especially in a more advanced role, and Brighton look a bit thin on the ground in those wing positions, so there's an outside shot. You might get an out of position defender here for 4.5. The data suggests he's pretty advanced. And I think at times last season we saw that. I just don't think you can be secure enough in the knowledge that he's going to play at all. So yeah, the longer I look at the 4.5s, the more I'm like, I don't love any of them. Aya's probably my favorite now if he plays and if Vandenberg is out. I'm going off Luke Shaw a little bit because I like the first two fixtures and I can get on board with having him just for that reason. But he's got almost no attacking upside. I think he got 1 goal, 1 assist last season. He's never picked up many ever. And they're actively looking at finding another left back. Whether that is Lewis Hall or not, yet to be seen. But that doesn't bode well for Luke Shaw medium to long term. It can't be that Carrick's got a load of confidence in him for the long term. I don't know. If at 4.5, look, you get 2 good fixtures to begin with. You can bench him after that. I've not gone off of that altogether, and I think he'll probably play the first 2 no matter what. But I do just wonder if I can find someone with something else about them, at least DEFCON or at least some attacking upside that I can hope for more than 6 points from. Whereas Luke Shaw, it does feel like, almost feels like David Raya last season, which didn't end up being the case. But yeah, it's 2 or 6. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you can hit 6s in both the first 2 and you bench him after that and you're fine. But
that's literally what I'm thinking. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
I throw an Aya. It's either him or Aya. It's kind of what it boils down to for me. Because he may get DEFCON, and regardless of the fixtures, I think the Brentfords are all right, actually, their fixtures. And they're not like amazing. I'm pretty happy with them.
Some decent home ones in there. They were decent at keeping clean sheets in weeks where I almost didn't expect them last season as well. And Kelleher's a good keeper too. So I think they'll keep the odd clean sheet.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I've had either. I think literally it's almost literally an ownership play to put Shaw in, because at the price you might as well, if that's kind of the kicker you want to use to judge your pick by. But it doesn't matter, honestly. The ownership isn't that high. Just quick word, Jed Spence at 10%. James at Planet just kind of laughed at that suggestion and said there's no way that he's going to be playing, and it's just a bit of a World Cup afterglow. So if you do have him in your team, I'd strongly suggest you look elsewhere. 4.0s then, Sam. So they've all been taken, all of the newly promoted are all at 4.0. Our man, Leaf, Christian Eriksen, is not a 4.5 this year. Ipswich, to start with, Diop is the highest owned at the moment, 20%. Played 7 minutes, the last friendly, not in the side tonight, which is quite interesting. He did play at the World Cup for Morocco. Not really known to be a DEFCON guy, it's fair to say, but he hasn't really been a nailed starter anywhere in his career. On the other side of that, though, Greaves at Ipswich, a 9.6 DEFCON per 90 last year, would have gotten around that in the Prem the year before, 231 DEFCON and 25 starts. But Darragh O'Shea actually is currently in my actual team, Sam. A bit less than a Champo, but he got bang on 10 DEFCON per 90 for Burnley the year before, 350 DEFCON in 35 games he got in 24-25, and that would be club captain. So you'd imagine that Diop would probably come in for Greaves unless Gary O'Neill goes for 5 at the back. So I think he's probably the 4.0 for me right now. Yeah, it's not that exciting, is it? Bobby Thomas, 8.5 DEFCON per 90 over at Coventry. Van Elwick created a big chance every 4 games, decent XA. It's slim pickings. Honestly, don't look at a whole defender. Just don't.
Yeah, no. I think for me, the 4 million defender price bracket is all about what your chip strategy is, and you just pick the one that suits it. If you're bench boosting game week 1, go for an Ipswich defender, maybe 2 if you're feeling it. I'm not personally at the moment. But yeah, I'd look at Ipswich defenders. I'd probably favour O'Shea, but if you fancy some attacking upside, go Davis. If you're bench boosting game week 1, if you're bench boosting game week 2, which also seems quite popular, then you're looking at a Coventry defender. I would recommend Thomas. Good attacking output last season and not bad DEFCON either, as you've already hinted at. And Hull-wise, I mean, not for me, but I think Hughes averages like 11.8 DEFCON per 90 if you wanted a Hull defender. What I will say is I like the fact that they've priced all of the promoted defenders at 4, because I think it just gives you a little bit more interest in someone like Davis, for instance, or Van Awick, because last year they would have been 4.5 and no one would have even talked about them. At least now it's a discussion. Like, do you want to chase a bit of attacking upside? Do you want to go DEFCON? Do you want to avoid altogether? At least it brings them into the chat a little bit. And just like that, we're going to move on from them, aren't we?
Yeah, just to clarify, I meant that Diop wasn't in the starting 11, not that he wasn't in the squad. He came on at half time.
Right.
Today. I mean, I was just
sense.
like, why is he not in the starting 11? Not that why he's not in the squad. All right, on to the midfielders, 6 to 7. Szoboszlai, we would actually, it's worth noting, be second overall amongst mids according to the index that I put together. As I mentioned with Rice last week, an all-action midfielder who has XGI, some DEFCON, only if he's been playing at right back, of course, and minutes. All of these things kind of just place that player pretty high up. Did have a look at him for Tasman Theory. It's notable. He scored 6 goals last year. 3 of them came from direct free kicks at big moments. Notable victories versus Arsenal and City. +1 versus Spurs. No one cares about them. Which makes us think maybe he's doing this all the time. No, he's not. He's scored 3 direct free kicks. Took 1 penalty. Missed it. I think that Isak's going to be on those penalties. Pen share probably, if we're going to stick a finger in the air. Probably... If Isak's not on the pitch, 33%, because he may be subbed off in the 65th minute because of his fitness. I don't know. It's very sort of like I think it's safe to say he's probably not on pen because Isak's not on the pitch. But the ownership is gargantuan. It really is ridiculous. 47.5%. If he does a goal in game week 1, and then he's got Forest at home, okay, that might not be the best fixture in the world, might not be the worst fixture in the world. Then he's got Ipswich, then he's got Fulham. That train is gonna really, really ride, because you're gonna have people going, oh my goodness, I need to get on this. Okay, if it goes the other way, maybe other people sell him, but those fixtures are actually quite good. So maybe people would be like, well, I'm not going to sell this guy. I'm probably going to keep him. Either way, I prefer to go with the crowd on this one. Totally unsexy, very, very beige as a naughty's living room, which I'll come back to on Thursday. But I think that is the real politique of the situation sometimes when it comes to FPL, especially towards the start of the year. We try to make all these little sort of niche picks. Oh, yeah, no, let's look at Manzambi. Oh, isn't he great for Freiburg? But really, the reality is players like this, if they're well owned and have something about them, you're probably better off going with them than not and just building that base to start with.
Yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not thinking about the ownership when it comes to Szoboszlai at all. He's on set pieces and he's bloody good at them, and he's targeting Van Dijk from all of the indirect ones. He's also got all of those routes to points. I agree with the penalty share thing. Isak is probably ahead of him, but Isak is rarely ever on the pitch for 90 minutes and it struggles to stay fit. So what's to say he doesn't just go off injured in game week 2 or 3 and we don't see him for another 4 weeks? And then Szoboszlai all of a sudden has 100% penalty share. So the weighting of that penalty share versus the expected minutes is very important, because he's going to play all of the minutes. And that is half the game in FPL. I think it's so undervalued having a player that literally just plays. You never have to worry about him. It's not like Foden, for instance, who I'm sure we're going to mention at some point in this bracket, who has all of the upside in the world, can be one of the sexiest picks in FPL when he's on form. But could you look me in the eye and say he's starting all of the first 5 game weeks? No, you can't. And you definitely can't tell me he's going to get 90 in all of them. Szoboszlai, barring something really weird happening, will. And even if he's playing in the 8, which, by the way, he played in a lot last season and has done historically, the data's still fine. The DEFCON's still okay. And he's got all of these other routes like set pieces, indirect and direct. It's going to add up to being a good FPL pick at 7 million. Is he essential? No, because no one is. And Vert's playing at 7.5 million in the 10 might end up being even better than Szoboszlai. But it's the keyword might. Whereas Szoboszlai, I know what I'm getting. Like, I'm going to probably get 160 to 180 points again this season. And I can almost just take that to the bank for 7 million. And I'm happy with that. And the fixtures to begin with are good enough that why would I go against someone that I'm pretty confident does well anyway? So yeah, he's in, and I'd be very surprised if he comes out for me.
Another player who I'll be shocked if he's not in your team on Thursday, Elliot Anderson. Mad Defcon, not bad XGI per 90, really. It's only him and Garner who recorded the hit rate of over 50% last year in this bracket of 6.5s to 7s. Just want to note before you go on your massive love letter to Elliot Anderson, it's a real shame about Garner being out. He was a lock in my team as the Defcon plus SGI guy. 6.0, I think, is an excellent price for him. And I'm sure I'll be coming back to him around the time of the first wild card. I like Dewsbury Hall. I did notice that he featured in one of your videos recently, crept into one of the drafts. But 6.0 for Ghana. Oh, what could have been Elliot Anderson, though, Sam. Decent DEFCON. If Rodri, who did I removed from this just because I'm fairly convinced he'll be off ski to Real Madrid. But if he's not, I think he's probably worth thinking about 6.5. But Anderson, is he going to be able to do it for Maresca? I don't know, man. I think he might.
Yeah, look, a 6.5 is not cheap for someone who predominantly deals in DEFCONs. And a lot of people are suggesting the DEFCONs will go down at Man City. And I think that's a fair assumption. He probably won't have to do as much defending or as much recovering as he had to do at Nottingham Forest. However, in the limited matches that we've been able to see Elliot Anderson playing in, where they dominate possession, and I am mainly looking at England here because we've got that going back to qualifiers and then obviously part of the World Cup itself, he still does pick up a lot of DEFCON. Like it does not just drop through the floor. And because he mainly deals in recoveries beyond anything else, that is quite repeatable at Man City. They are going to need a guy to pick up the loose ball, to recover it, to recycle possession and to start the attack again and just build that pressure up. So do I think it will remain at 13.9 per start? Probably not, because that is ludicrously high. And it was probably a unique situation at Nottingham Forest where he had to do more than he will at Man City. But even if his DEFCON hit rate drops from 70% to 50%, he's still likely to hit 160 to 170 points this season. And I do think that his XGI per 90 probably takes a little step up at Man City. So maybe what he loses in DEFCON, he makes up for in the odd extra attacking return, because he's got elite footballers around him that from a half chance can end up taking that. And all of a sudden he ends up with 7 or 8 assists this season. So all of that to say 6.5, yeah, face value, that looks a bit too expensive for a DEFCON guy, but I think he is a bit more than a DEFCON guy. And I don't think the DEFCONs will drop through the floor, even if they drop a bit. He's actually not in my current draft, which will surprise you. We'll look at that on Thursday. Yeah, I know it's a proper bomber that. But he's very close to my draft. Put it that way. He's always in my thinking. I'm pretty confident that he starts, plays 90, and ends up being a really good, reliable pick once again. And it's just points you can take to the bank most weeks. But yeah, he's not in my draft at the moment. We'll come on to that on Thursday, I'm sure. He might even be back in by that point, to be honest. But yeah, he's great. I wouldn't worry too much about him just dropping through the floor at Man City just because they have more possession. I think his role will still be to recover the ball quite a lot. And even if it drops a bit, I think he makes up for it in attacking upside.
Yep, I think so. And I also think that it's interesting, isn't it? Because if he was at 6, I think he'd probably be one of those players that would be in every team. It's just that extra point. Yep. It's that extra 0.5, isn't it? That makes you think, oh, I don't know, it's not as easy.
If psychologically, having him ahead of a penalty taker for 0.5 is,
It's crazy, isn't it? How small the margin is for a player like Anderson, whereas with a player like Haaland, it would have been like, you'd have to be looking at 16.5 for me to be like, no, I'm not interested. I'm probably for there to be a world where I would say that.
Yeah.
But for these players, it's just that 0.5, isn't it? That can start to make you think, oh, I don't know. I just don't know. Well, he is what he is. Also at 7, Enzo Fernandez had recorded a very decent XGI 90 last year. The top of this particular group, 0.54. Well, I mean, if you're an England fan, you probably might harbour a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, that's for sure. 0.54 at XGI per 90, though, enough to be sniffed at. Is he going to move? We don't know. One of those players that I'm very happy to just see what happens with him. Also at 7, Cody Gakpo could be on the move, being linked to Spurs. I mean, yeah, if he went to Spurs and end up being the striker, potential in penalties, as James Planet said in his first pod back, I mean, surely that is of real interest. And Foden, one of the pillars according to Maresca, 0.47
Love them
net
pillars.
last year. Love a pillar, love a Hercules. I'm more of an Ionic guy. I know some people are all about the Dorians, but I'm an Ionic fella. 0.47 XGI per 90, probably literally just that Christmas period. Like it's probably just like a big bell curve that comes up over Christmas. There will be a Fodening point next year. And also of the 7's Bruno Guimaraes, who is likely to be Bruno Guimaraes-tional. Sorry.
Wow.
Next year. He's not going to get the same numbers. He probably won't be on penalties, which obviously puffed up a lot of the XGI per 90. And I don't know. I like the idea of Foden. But more than anything, I like the fact that he's 7.0 and I can get there relatively easily. Like, I think that at 7, I'm probably going to just opt for Szoboszlai, unfortunately, as boring as that sounds.
Yeah, look, I really want to have Phil Foden because I love him. I really want him to be a brilliant FPL pick, but hand on heart, I cannot tell you that he's going to absolutely start the first 5 games. Like we said it earlier, I would love him to be nailed because if he is, 7 is ludicrously cheap. But that's why he's 7 million, because he's not nailed. And at times he might become it. And great, we'll be very interested when that happens. But looking at the way that City are likely to play, it's between him and Cherky in behind Haaland. And Cherky's a phenomenal footballer. So it's just a risk. And what other positions would he play in? Well, okay, they might have Anderson as the holding, scrap the Rodri position and just have Foden next to Cherky. But that's really quite attacking. And I don't know how durable that is in any sort of tougher games. So straight away, then it's a situational thing where you can guarantee him starting. So I think it's just going to end up being too risky for me to begin with. All of that to say, we'll watch him in the Community Shield. He'll bang in a brace and we'll be like, yep, essential, buy him immediately. Like this pod will date very, very quickly because all it takes with a player like that is just a sniff of form. And you're like, oh yeah, but he does go on streaks and then you get him straight away. But right now, that my head versus heart in my head is saying, remember what he did last season, and then he just comes straight back out of the team. And I'm just not up for that this year. I don't want that kind of risk in my team in game week 1, especially not on a bench boost. If I'm doing it, it just feels pointless when I've got others that are $1 million cheaper on penalties, even $1.5 million cheaper in one case on penalties. So I think I'll leave it for now. It's a shame because I'd love him, but yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. All right, so if we're going down from 7 and for whatever reason you've only got 6.5 to play with, we'll talk about the 6 in a minute. At 6.5, it really comes down to Elliot Anderson, basically. A lot of these players, Kinder, Dewsbury Hall, really good points per start last year, just over 5. Dango Tara came out with a 0.47 XGI per 90. Wilson, when he was at Fulham, the highest point scorer of Nansen here, really good points per start at 5.25. And then you've got the likes of Erdegaard, Ismail Sarr, a player that we both really like, admire, really good non-pen data, good for a decent amount of points every year. And then Ryan at Bournemouth. But Elliot Anderson, I think, is kind of what I'd always be thinking about if I had that to play with, or I'd kind of like having Szoboszlai and then going kind of down to those players if needs be. Like they're a good exit route more than anything, you know. I like Sade being 6 and Dango being 6.5. I think it's quite interesting because Sade historically has been kind of a bit explosive, but hey ho, very, very small side point. It's not really. It's a bit of an awkward price bracket purely because of how, for boring FPL anoraks like us, Elliot Anderson is so obvious as the pick in the 6.5 if you've got that slot available. It's kind of like, because Szoboszlai exists, Elliot Anderson doesn't appear in my team. That's literally the only reason. And the rest of these players are sort of like, it's nice that they're there, but they're mostly kind of off ramps for me from those two players predominantly.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What I will say is at 6.5, I think at least one or two of these end up being fantastic picks. And if you've got a strong gut feeling on any of them, I've seen Wilson in the chat, Dango Otara at times as well. I really like Ismail Assar, as you mentioned. If you've got a really strong gut feeling, I don't think there's anything wrong with going for them over Elliot Anderson. But I'm almost repeating exactly what I said this time last year at a million extra on Anderson. You can guarantee almost that he will be in the top 2 or 3 point scorers at this price point by the end of the season. He's got quite minimal error bars. Like there's not a massive area the points distribution could cover for him, as long as he doesn't get injured or something really weird happens where he's not a starter for City, which I can't picture. Whereas a lot of these other 6.5 millions, 1 or 2 of them might outscore him because their distribution is a wider range of variance. Like you could have 1 or 2 of them that just explode and go on a run like Wilson did last season. But even though that happened, he still finished 12 points under Elliot Anderson, who did nothing really that exciting all year. Picked up 3 goals, I think, 4 assists, something like that, like 7 or 8 attacking returns. Nothing monumental, but still outscored him by 12 points. And that was the highest scorer on this list of the 6.5 midfielders, aside from Anderson. All of the other ones were miles off. So yeah, if you've got a strong gut feeling, absolutely 1 or 2 of them might just explode. Great. But I think you can take the Anderson points to the bank. And I don't know why I would take the risk at the moment. If one was going to tempt me, it probably would be Sarr at 6.5 though. I do have a good gut feeling about him.
Yeah, I feel like he's one that's perennially going to do points or when you used to expect him to. At 6, there's definitely an awful lot in the consideration set. I'm going to start with and die just because he's one of those players at the start of the year. But it's like, 6 is a great price. Question marks circling, linking him to Saudi. On reflection, on pens, great. But other than that, maybe a bit of an all fart merchant, to be honest, over the last few years, looking at online numbers. Obviously, the minutes are there, which I completely understand. But at 6, I don't know, there's quite a lot of players in that sort of category that I kind of don't mind the look of. We are beginning to enter sort of full-on punt territory, and the existence of a player at 5.5 that we'll speak about in a minute kind of makes me think it's worth taking 0.5 out of this and using that 0.5 for something else. But you've got the likes of Alex Scott, whose DEFCON per start last year was pretty good, 11.4. Will he stay at Bournemouth? Probably. Graven Birch seems to kind of do goals early on in the season. But I mean, there's probably nothing to commend him to us. Tavernier and Kluivert probably got scored a couple of penalties in a 10-1 victory over Bologna today. Definitely worth noting, people. It was a game of 4 halves of 30 minutes, 4 quarters of 30 minutes.
So the World Cup special, great.
Yeah, exactly. Sade, as I mentioned earlier on, Minte, I don't think I was looking there. Harvey Barnes, I think probably could be quite interesting this year. 0.45 extra per 90. Probably going to actually get those starts this year. Another one, I mentioned the bit for Chow and people might jump on. I think Barnes is probably a good one at 6. I think probably the 2 here, Sam, are Lefay, who is appearing in quite a few teams. I'm not entirely sure. He's got pen share, but he hasn't got penalties. Diarra took one last year when he was on the pitch. And there's Dorgu as well, who's got a really mad points per start from last year of 6.33. And I think it actually came out today that Carrick does see him as left winger. Problem is that if he sees him as left winger, suddenly he's got all sorts of competition for his spot.
Yeah. I can't see Dorgu being a pick, unfortunately. That 6.33 will be elevated by the odd clean sheet, I would have thought, because he was classified as a defender as well, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so unless he ends up being nailed in that left wing at 6, then maybe. But right now, no, because Sesko might be fit to start the season. Therefore, Cunha gets pushed left. And then Rashford's still at the club as well. So there's 3 players into one position there potentially. I know he rates Dorgu, but does he rate him highly enough to oust both Rashford and Cunha? I doubt it. So not for me, but admittedly, if he does get a run of starts, he could be interesting. Njai, if he stays at the club, I still think it's a fantastic pick. I don't know how sure we'll be that he will stay at the club come game week 1. So that is a risk. I quite like Lefay. I think he's kind of a mini Bruno in the sense he's got a little bit of everything, just for like literally half the price, and he's half the player, I suppose, in terms of FPL ability. The penalty share thing, I think I read somewhere that they basically have a discussion between themselves at the beginning and said, yeah, I'm having the one this week if it comes up between him and Diarra. But I think in a complete like head-to-head situation, Diarra would probably end up taking more of them than Lefay. Still, he's got a bit of share at 6 million. I think it's decent. Good couple of opening fixtures. Yeah, if we have more clarity over Bournemouth and Tav versus Clivert, I think that would be helpful. I think Clivert will probably have the penalties ahead of him, but I would like to know how many minutes Clivert's going to get. Looks like he might be a starter, so it kind of kills Tav as a pick. The 6 millions, I think it's an interesting bracket, but I don't know if I'm in love with any of them anymore. There's a couple of penalty takers in there, and I think Njai, if he stays at Everton, ends up probably being the standout at 6. But there is then the question mark over whether or not he is staying in the Premier League.
Yeah. Also, like Stack at 6 is worth mentioning too, just because of the batshit crazy Instagram posts more than anything else.
I think he's going to lose set pieces though, right?
Yeah,
and probably play a little bit deeper.
Yeah. It might get more DEFCON. He's quite a DEFCON friendly guy. He didn't get over the 12 last year. It's about 9, 10, I think it was.
9.5, 36% hit rate. Yeah, decent.
Cool. Other players, Manzambi, I mentioned earlier on, 0.4 XI per 90. One of those players who a couple of years ago on Fantasy Bundesliga costed 1 million. So same as a 4.5 million midfielder. But was just ridiculously good. Loves a dribble, by the way. And there'll be lots of kind of athletic posts dissecting his dribbling. I can guarantee by the time he gets to November. Really, really interesting character. One I'm very happy to wait and see on. But yeah, I really like him. I've learned my lesson about buying players from the Bundesliga that I like from the last few years. From Florian Wirtz to Kai Havertz. I'm just going to let that happen, and then I'll jump on later on if needs be. Baz Toure over at Newcastle was also signed. Also from the Bundesliga, was at Hoff last year. A bit quieter than Manzambi. He's more of a creative sort of winger. I can't say he crossed my mind in Bundesliga last year at all, which probably says it all. 0.38 XGI per 90 though. Munoz, the new signing at Liverpool, ex-Madrid. He went to Osasuna. 6 goals, 2 assists last year, presumably a squad player. Yeah. Matoma might be all right, but as we'll discuss in a minute, there are a couple of very good Brighton picks in 4.5 to 5.5, and the existence of one of them in Pascal Gross, it's probably the reason why those 6 millions aren't as exciting to me right now. But of all of these, I think the top 2 in the index are Szoboszlai and Anderson. I think they're top for a reason. If Garner was around, I think there'd be more of a discussion, but as it is, they're top for a reason, and I think I'd take Szoboszlai. And as it is, I think Gross is 5.5 is probably the one.
Yeah. Can I a quick mention? It triggered when you said Munoz as a squad player. I wonder if Ungamoa might be an option to begin with, considering 6 million, good underlying data. They don't really have much depth across that front three, especially if they sell Gakpo as well. So just one to keep an eye on. I don't think I'll be starting with him, but we know he's got like the upside potentially. So yeah, just wanted to flag it because we didn't include him. We'll see.
Oh, it'd be incredible if he turns like Raheem Sterling, that a few years ago when it was Sterling, Suarez and Sturridge. Oh man, that would be incredible.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
We shall
Game
see. There's
breaker.
always going to be one. There's always going to be one. Right.
Yeah.
The midfielders, 4.5 to 5.5. Obviously, there's no 4.5s on here apart from Will Hughes. But I want to start off Pascal Gross. Obviously, very low on this particular index. That's purely because his start percentage is low because he only played half a year. It's worth noting that if you did shove that up to kind of 85% of the starts, he'd be easily in the top 5 of the 5.5 to 4.5 bracket. As it is, it's Casado, Supermendi, and Ampadu as the top 3. I think the fact that is he the cheapest player who's likely to spend penalties? I think he probably is.
Yeah.
Has that most of the set piece monopoly, and also is fairly creative, as we've seen. I think he's probably the one. He's 35 years old. They do have the Europa Conference League qualifier, sandwiching game week 1. You're probably not going to need him for game week 2 if you're going to go with him at Chelsea, depending if you're bench boosting 1 or 2, of course. But I think the fact that he's there, he's 5.5, likely on penalties. I think that his case is suddenly just through the roof, really, in terms of an individual purchase, and his existence kind of just knocks out the 6 million for me. And he's just such a great little kind of pickup. I'm sure we're going to all forget about him. We'll definitely talk about Mamadou Sangare in a second. I know there's a lot of people probably think, oh God, what? But you're missing this guy. But as it
Don't
is,
worry.
I really like that guy.
Yeah, look, it's a gift. Accept the gift. He's 5.5 million, decent data. Like, he'll hit the odd DEFCON once in a blue moon, and he's got penalties. He's also got a wicked delivery into the box on him. So I just think what's not to love? Yeah, take the extra 0.5 over some of the 6 millions. Accept the really cheap penalty taking player. Great. Yeah, he's getting on a bit. That might end up being a thing to monitor around Christmas, but he should be fairly fresh, and he played 90 minutes every single week when he got in for Brighton last season, and it's not like he's aged 5 years in that time. He's a few months older. He's not just fallen off a cliff over the summer. Hopefully he's kept himself fit. I don't think there's anything to be too worried about there. So yeah, Gross at 5.5 is just such a fantastically valuable pick to have, and enables so much. It will just get boring because we'll all just continuously say how great he is, and then there will eventually be the buts and the naysayers, because that's how it always works. But sometimes it's as simple and as boring as he's a bit too cheap for what he provides. Welbeck left, so he's even better now. So take it or miss out on the points. And yeah, I'm gonna have him easy.
Yeah, me too. I do like Sangare, DEFCON machine, 14 DEFCON per 90. This is the Brentford one. But
Yeah,
important
to get that right.
yeah. Was it long? We have seen a lot of players join from the French league. Players like Jean-Michel Seri, who joined Fulham a few years ago. He was like the best thing since sliced bread. Didn't really do it in the league. Morgan Samson, who joined Aston Villa, another one who was like meant to be like this incredible midfielder, and
Pepe as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and Tanguy Ndombele, of course. A lot of these players join from France and not do it, but it is Brentford, so you gotta assume they know what they're doing. As it stands, because it's Gross, I kind of prefer to go that way, but if I had space for 2 5.5s, I'd have both of them. I've actually got the other Sangare, who we'll talk about in a minute right now. It's not a mistake if you see it on Thursday. But yeah, I don't mind either of those as pickups. It's annoying looking at the 5.5s because there's such an obvious standout, really, in terms of kind of the points potential. I mean, I don't mind Casado, who we at the start of last year we were looking at, just going like, oh, this guy can get like 250 points, isn't he? Because he went like a massive DEFCON tear, 11.4 per start last year. It did slow down. Fixtures are okay, but it's almost like with Chelsea, because they've got Haaland game week 4. You don't want to take up that Chelsea slot, do you? In case you do kind of turn around and go, right, okay, I want to get Palmer/Rodgers in, and then I don't know, who you'd be looking at.
Yeah.
Palestra
There'll be some
suddenly looks
there'll
incredible.
be some wing backs that are interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of kills it. I just kind of think, well, I don't want to be using a Chelsea slot on that. And
Not when you
Zubimendi,
can have someone who's as good on DEFCON for a different side that you don't want to triple up on at any point this season.
exactly.
So
Yeah, completely. Zubimendi, I don't think you can trust the minutes at the moment, especially if Bruno Guimaraes starts. I do like Ethan Ampadu actually at 5.5. If it was 5.0, I think we pretty much all be all over him. Got over half, 54% starts DEFCON hit rate last year. I know he did bits for quite a few people last year, like friend of the pod Kev. 11.9 DEFCON per start last year, which is as good as basically DEFCON a lot of the time, or in the mix for DEFCON at the time. I think it's like a Bentancur is actually the best in terms of DEFCON versus hit rate, 57%. Are you really going there? Probably not.
He won't play, will he?
I don't know. I'm sure I saw something.
Fans let us know. I don't think he will.
Saw something that De Zerbi wanted to kind of involve him a lot more.
Interesting.
It's not that bad, old Rod.
Where does he fit in? Tonali, Fernandez, Maddison, Gallagher. Where does he play?
No idea. Absolutely no idea. Hopefully we'll find out over correspondent week and looking at the preseason friendlies. That's the only thing I can hold my hat on there. And then players like Damsgaard, Sam Gare's there. He's got a really good XGI per 90, old Damsgaard. Jeremy Pino, Sam, I just wanted to mention very quickly, with 0.47 XGI per 90, the Spain World Cup winner at Crystal Palace. One of those players that could flower. With one of those, I think when he joined last year, we were both shocked at the amount of actual World Cup appearance, the amount of international appearances he had. But I think honestly at 5.5, it is probably one of the existing players. It's Xhaka, who's got decent DEFCON per start, okay at show per 90, or Armand Gross or Sangare. And there's also Maeda at Ipswich and did a goal at the World Cup, obviously. Decent numbers for Celtic, was forced to play up front for them. More of a left wing assassin, so forwards. The numbers that he put up for Celtic are obviously irrelevant for the Premier League if he's playing for Ipswich.
Yeah, basically. I think you're completely right. The standouts at this point in time are Gross and Mamadou Sangare. I don't mind Ibrahim Sangare at 5 potentially. But yeah, that's a whole different ball game. If I've got the extra 0.5, I would go for Gross or Mamadou. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what the Brentford's Sangare does pre-season, whether he is starting, whether he looks nailed. But I think if he does going into game week 1, he's going to be great value for money, like in very, very good value. Probably Elliot Anderson Mark II kind of levels. Pino, I actually didn't even notice was 5.5. That's actually really good XGI per 90 for someone at that price. So yeah, I'm fairly interested to see what the new manager does with him. Ampadu, not bad. Yeah, I mean, it feels almost silly to discuss too many of them in depth because I know which one or two I would pick. So beyond that, I'm not going to have 3 5.5s or below. So I doubt it's going to be relevant. If you're going to 5, Diego Gomez looks interesting though. I'm pretty interested in him at that price. Good XGI. Not bad DEFCON for a winger. I know he's played centre midfield as well, but Brighton, as we mentioned earlier, don't have many fit wingers at the moment. I think Matoma's out, Minte's on one side, probably Diego Gomez on the other. Might be a pretty nice enabler for the first few game weeks if you want to bench boost early and get it out of the way. So yeah, one to keep an eye on at 5.
Yeah. Only reason I don't have Gomez is I'm uncomfortable tripling up on Brighton at the start of the season.
That's fair. Yeah.
I've got Sangare, the Forest one, in at 10.7 DEFCON per start last year. I mean, it's slim pickings the further down you go in the pricing. Yomaliuk, I'm sure I said that wrong, at Brentford, got 11.3 DEFCON per start last year, but with new signings, who knows who plays there. Norgard went to Everton at 5.0 as well. Something to kind of bear in mind. I've said people have mentioned Roll as well at Everton, doing very well. The Wizard Merlin. Yeah, not entirely sure on that one. Schlager at Forest was a bit of an ever-present for Red Bull Leipzig in the Bundesliga, 9 DEFCON per 90. I'm sure he'll kind of play quite a lot of minutes for Forest, but remains to be seen. There are a couple more from newly promoted clubs. Rudoni at Coventry, 7 goals, 6 assists, 0.4 XGI per 90 for Coventry last year. Does have a shoulder injury, so we can see if he plays, but potentially if they can bench boost in game week 2 and he is fit, could be one to keep an eye on. And just today, Florentino Luis signed for Ipswich from Burnley. Last year, he got 12.5 DEFCON per 90 with a 56% hit rate. And I'd imagine he gets a 5 or a 5.5. If he gets 5, then I think that he suddenly becomes incredibly interesting. So I really want people to shut up about him and not mention anything.
Yeah, no one say a word. To be fair, it worked. Everyone was talking about Mamadou Sangare, and we were convinced he's going to come in at 6, and they've priced him at 5.5. So, I mean, for Ipswich, you'd imagine. I actually kind of think he will come in at 5. I think 5.5 would be expensive for an Ipswich midfielder. So, yeah, fingers crossed. If you're bench boosting game week 1 as well, having a 5 million DEFCON guy in the midfield for a team playing at home, absolutely fine. So yeah, fingers crossed on that one. But everyone keep it to yourselves. Yeah, don't start posting about it on Twitter, X, Blue Sky, wherever. It stays between us, and hopefully it can be our little secret.
Exactly. Quick one of 4.5s. I just don't think any of them are viable. Unfortunately, no. Sort of Slater has been slated to be the best thing since sliced bread. 10.5 DEFCON per 90 last year, but who's to say Hull won't sign 1 million players over the course of the next couple of weeks, which looks like they're shaping up to do. They avoided their SCR issues by selling their goalkeeper, didn't they? So they can basically just sign people to their heart's content. I just can't see him staying in the team. I just can't see another 4.5 being worth anybody's time. I think that junk in that spot is probably the worst thing you can do compared to junking or taking a 4.0. Obviously, bench boost 1, you just can't do it, which is why I've got Sangare in from Forest. But yeah, I just can't see a world where that's a good idea, especially if you do go for Slater and just find him at 4.4 by game week 2. Yeah, you could absolutely junk to that and snooker yourself in the process. But yeah. I guess it's kind of the 5s of the new 4.5s now, people.
I think so. Yeah, if you're looking for a playing mid, you're probably having to pay that extra 0.5. There might be an exception with Will Hughes for the first couple of weeks if Wharton's out. I think he was wearing a protective boot recently, but players tend to do that just as a precaution more than anything else now as well. So I think there was that famous picture of Bruno in a protective boot and he played 2 days later, right? So I wouldn't take that as a given. Yeah, I mean, I don't really pay any attention to the 4.5 mids this season. I haven't really looked into it too much because not many of them seem like they're going to be starters. And even Slater, as the most nailed right now, as you correctly say, might not be nailed by game week 1 or 2. So yeah, I'll pay the extra 0.5, 1 million quite happily there.
Right. That was ridiculous. Got through so much. Anybody that we've forgotten to mention, Dom Solanke could get minutes, could be good. Yeah, it's always a minefield going through these cheap players. There are so many that could eventually, as you said right at the top, Sam, turn out to be the guy. It's probably just the case of going on what you know now. Obviously, the preseason can be very, very helpful, especially for those new players. Like, really, I think like Vuskovic and Sangare, the Brentford one of the two that are probably going to have the eyes on them pre-season. I always err away from signing these players on FPL to start the season, but those who do have a decent case purely because of their underlying where they were playing before, and normally there's an okay sort of crossover between those leagues. Realistically, though, I think as we'll see on Thursday, there probably are a few picks that we've kind of gone through and mentioned. Szoboszlai at 7, Gross at 5.5. Maybe not as kind of closed at 5.0, but Ballard and Neco Williams, sure at 4.5, and then depending on chip strategy, probably the 4.5 goalkeepers that are top of the pile. But it's a very sort of, it's a bit of a house of cards, really. All it will take is one or two sort of very pertinent pieces of information in preseason, and suddenly the whole thing may fall over because there may be something that becomes incredibly obvious that we all need to go for, which will slightly blow everything else out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, this time last week, we didn't have 2 or 3 of the players that we mentioned today as really interesting, even on the radar, or maybe even the week before. And things change very quickly. This time next week, there might be another penalty taker at 5.5 and it rips apart the template once more. So we can only work on the information we've got today. But by the time we get to Friday, the 21st of August, we might have a completely different set of information. So yeah, form strong opinions, but don't hold on to them too tightly. Information can move pretty quickly in this game. So I'm trying not to get too attached to any specific player or draft. That being said, there are a few that I would be pretty surprised leave my draft now, including like Szoboszlai, like we mentioned earlier. But even players like that, be open to the idea that information can change. That is probably the only good advice you'll hear from me all season, if that's even good advice in the first place.
That's great advice, Sam. And we'll give some more on Thursday. So in terms of the pre-season schedule, there's 3 pieces of content left, 1 written, 2 spoken. This Thursday, it's 5th of August, current chip thinking and drafts, and some simple rules to assist you. We're going to say we're going to do 10. We've done that so many times. I think maybe we just kind of boil it down to maybe 5 or 6 that we really like, just to assist you not balls it up, basically, rather than tickets to success. Talisman Theory will be on the week commencing the 10th when I'm away. I think we'll put the audio from the Thursday pod out on that week, so you've got something to listen to, but you can watch it on YouTube if you want it. Talisman Theory I'll put out probably towards the end of the week of the 10th. And yeah, a final pre-game one preview on Tuesday the 18th, where we'll also talk about how we're tweaking the structure for the game week pods this year and give our quasi final drafts and our thinking and just talk about everything else before we head into the season proper, which I can't wait for. It's been very good to have a short preseason though, because after a while we end up running out of things to talk about. We didn't run out of things to talk about in this pod, and I'm sure there's loads of people that we have forgotten. Do tell us if you do have a particular player you've got a hunch on, but yeah, I'm sorry, not sorry that we didn't speak about them today.
We tried our best, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. And thanks again, especially if you're new around here, or indeed if you're returning for a 10th season of WGTA. We really hope you'll be on board for the upcoming season ahead. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. FPL Pricey for me. On X, it's WGTA_FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, written out all one word. And again, you can guess it, I'm FPL Pricey on there as well. If you did enjoy the pod, please do consider following us on those social channels. But also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, and giving it a like or subscribing on YouTube would also be greatly appreciated as well. All of those things really do help us out. And thank you all so much for listening.
Yep, thanks to all listeners and viewers, new and old, and somewhere in between. Always great fun. We hope we assist you think about the Tiddlers, those edge pieces in FPL this year. We'll be back for chips, drafts, and simple rules in a couple of days' time. So yeah, we'll see you on Thursday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?